Chapter 12, Making Friends with Yourself. When I did my first day-long practice of a mindfulness retreat, meditating for a whole day, I thought I'd burst out of my skin. But my hippie cred was on the line, so I managed to tough out a full day of being with myself. We started at about 9 a.m., and I was sure it'd be easy, as I had already been doing a mantra practice for 5 years. But reciting a mantra over and over was not really preparation for sitting quietly and facing the raw screaming in my head. Thinking back, I can still experience the claustrophobia I felt. But somehow I made it. Peer pressure and embarrassment at failing were motivation enough for me to plow through. When I got outside of the hall where we'd been locked up all day, the placement of my imprisonment and self-torture, I said, "Whoa, if that's the way to heaven, I'm out." And then the proverbial light went off. What exactly was so torturous about the day? Well, I had to spend it with this stark, raving madman. And that's when the life-changing moment happened. I realized I'd be spending my whole life with this lunatic no matter what I did. And that closed the deal. I knew I had to figure out how to enjoy the rest of my life with the crazy person, and he was me. Noodle on that for a bit. So I became interested in why this guy was so neurotic. The only way out was in. I had to face the music. Meditation hadn't created that screechy music. Meditation put me in the concert hall, where I could no longer pretend not to hear it. Would I spend the rest of my life covering my ears, or would I learn to stop and listen to the commentator in my head telling me all day long how I'm doing and what I need to do next? I realized the commentator had become more important than what was in front of me. I was preoccupied with the commentary and not the actual living. Strange. I went to a Buddhist talk once where the teacher said over and over, "You don't need to be afraid of who you are." He repeated that sentence tediously, emphasizing different words in the phrase. Okay, I thought. I don't need to be afraid of who I am. Of course I'm not afraid of who I am. I got this. I'm a fairly normal, nice guy from the Midwest. 10 years later, as I was doing a month-long solitary mountain retreat, and the retreat went on, I was experiencing more and more fear. I got so I wouldn't go to the outhouse at night to pee. I was scared, and then the teacher's words came back to me. You don't need to be afraid of who you are. You don't need to be afraid of who you are. And I got it. The reason my head was so noisy was that I was afraid of who I was. There was an on-guard quality about my mind, about my life. I had a deep fear of relaxing into nothingness, into beingness. Happiness was beckoning me to let go of a deep-seated distrust I had of myself and the universe. I didn't totally believe that the universe was a friendly place, nor that I was made from that same goodness. Our need to be anxious and on alert is like a 1,000-year generation habit. We're wired for it, as fear was necessary for survival. The term in neurology, conservation, describes the tendency of the brain to preserve habits, behaviors that have kept our species alive. The brain has been conserving fear as a survival technique for at least 200,000 years. It's only in the last 200 years or so, since the Industrial Revolution, that there's been less of a need for this kind of fear. Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker points out the laws and civilizations have made our lives safer than at any other time in human history. But old habits die hard. We have to replace them with something else or they won't let go. It's huge get to relax into the ground of goodness, to make friends with the basis of being itself, to allow oneself to relax into relaxing. This get is a necessary step on the way to joy. It's the process of making friends with yourself. Sounds easy, But we run so many pejorative tapes about ourselves, and we're tremendously skilled at pretending we aren't afraid. We're awfully rough on ourselves, harder than we'd ever be to someone we love. So that's it. We start to treat ourselves not like some hopeless project, but as a friend we know inside and out. We know when we're being rascally, and we can know with certainty our motivations for pursuing happiness. Now, I know that guy I had to become friends with is sometimes a schemer and stubborn, and yet there's something trustworthy about him. He really wants to benefit the planet. He likes to serve and help others. He might still position himself for the biggest piece of chocolate cake, but he's fundamentally a good guy. I don't need to be afraid of him, what he's built from, or the world he gets to live in. Meditation is getting familiar with trusting ourselves and relaxing into our being. We're not turning a turnip into a pineapple here. We're uncovering what your basic beingness is made from. If you rest your basic beingness, you discover happiness, joy, and love. You're never far from your own nature. Happiness is your nature, and to find your nature, you must relax and not struggle. That's why these happiness teachings are called nature of mind teachings.